Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Pavone. I'm the moderator this morning to make this easy and painless. Okay? And we have a great panel here. Just make sure I get the titles correct. Mitch Pally, Long Island Builders, Dave Panetta, Cushman and Wakefield, Keith Archer, Paris Bloom and Archer, and Bob Fonte, Suffolk Alliance of Chambers. Now, what we're going to do is very simple. You guys put 20s or more. Whoever gives more money to me, I'll give you less questions, and I'll treat you well. With all kidding aside, this is cutting the red tape. One of the things that I've been in business for over 32 years, and what I do in my business, I handle development, I handle process with municipalities, with developers, with residents. I'm also involved heavily in my community as a civic leader, and I understand both sides of the aisle, understand the government side, the community side, and that's something that what we as developers, residents, owners, taxpayers, everybody has to realize that there's a balance and there's a reason for certain things and why they happen. And sometimes development gets a life of its own because what ends up happening is somebody hears something and says, hey, they're going to build that over right in that corner. And all of a sudden, they're no good or something happens without really analyzing or understanding process. Process is extremely important for any development, for any community. Communities live or die on development. There comes a point where you reach a level and everything is stagnant, and there's always a cycle in the community. People move in, there's religious entities that are within that community so that the people can live there. And eventually 30 years goes by and all of a sudden people start moving out and new people start moving in. And the communities have to redevelop. And what we're here today is to talk about cutting the red tape. How do we continue that process? How do we fix or help municipalities understand what the people want, and also what government has to explain to the people what they believe is in their best interest? And that's part of the CEQA process, which, if you're not familiar with that, is the State Environmental Quality Review. The Industrial Development Associations, known as IDAs, that are promulgated within a county or towns, depending on which municipality is, and also mixed-use development and the development and process itself. So that's my opening statement for these gentlemen at this point, and what I'd like to do is I'll start with Bob, because actually Bob also is a co-chair of the Long Island Business Council, and I'm the chair in Nassau County, he's the chair in Suffolk County. And we get along really well.
Am I in Nassau now?
No, so Suffolk and Nassau.
Okay, I just want to make sure, do I have to get...
You're in Nassau, you're in Nassau. You gotta realize that, he normally gives me a validation for parking in Suffolk County. And won't have me arrested. We work together very well on opposite sides of the aisle politically, but we understand because we get to deal with both sides. And government is the way I see government is that at 12:01 the day starts. At 12 midnight the day ends. And most times things are reactionary to that day. And that's how they deal with it. And in the end, the next day starts, it's a whole new day, let's keep on going and move on in life. But places like Vision Long Island, what we're trying to do is make not only the communities understand, but the government side, that there's got to be a balance somewhere along the line as to creating something. And cutting the red tape is one of the most important things because of the process and how you have to go through to get a building permit, dealing with the building department, then it has to go to a planning department, then it has to go to a Board of Appeals possibly, then after the Board of Appeals it has to go to an architectural review board, after an architectural review board it has to go to the Board of Trustees or the town board. Then you have to get all of that, then you're going to the county and you're asking them for a process and approval for drainage and curb cuts and whether or not it's on their roadway. And then you go into the fire marshal's office because you want to build a building and then they want life safety. And when all that's done, as you're doing that, now you may have a restaurant, now you're going to the Board of Health. And each county has its own way of doing their Board of Health. So that's 32 years of dealing with every municipality on Long Island, which they are great, and it's always a learning experience. So Bob, I'm going to hand it to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Bob Fonte. You know who we are. I'd like to do, Richard, if it's okay, but I'd just like to know who you are. If you could just go around and just tell us Your name and your business, or where you're
Well,
from?
I'm Sandy Crowley, I'm just a resident of Three Village, and because Three Village has been stalled for a very long time, I'm wondering about cutting red tape and finding out, where some of the control
Great.
just get my sense.
I'm Joanna Weissman, I'm external affairs with DFP Long Island. I know we've spoken on our customer order fulfillment process and that everything, turn on facilitating things.
We hope we answered your questions.
Ken Christensen, Huntington Chamber of Commerce, Leadership Hub.
Karen Harding, the media, and is the director of the Leadership Long Island Award Film through 11/14.
My name is Brian Cooley. I'm in the title insurance business. I work for a company called MIT National. Years ago, I was a board member for Vision. I'm just a fan of knowing what's going on.
I'm Ray Bias. I work for OK McLean Associates for years. That's my day job, my night job. I'm chairman of the Village of Port Jefferson Planning Board.
Dennis Grossman, I'm president of DMI Consulting Group. We do business consulting. I've also been chair of the Great Neck Board of Zoning Appeals for about 15 years. And I'm Chamber of Commerce, Vision Long Island, and various other groups.
I'm Sal Coco. I'm an architect at BD Harvey Coco Architects. We do a lot of mixed-use buildings here on Long Island.
Michelle Basson, Deputy Commissioner of Planning and Development Department for the town of Islip. Until about a year ago, I was on the private sector, so now I'm on.
That's great.
Pamela Green, Counsel to Town of Islip IDA.
Thank you.
George Graff, Nassau County. I'm Deputy Director for Finance for CDBG Grants.
John Schaefer, I'm an attorney in Garden City, real estate, commercial projects.
Melissa Slayton, business development for engineering.
Catherine Heaviside, Epic Thought, Public Relations, Community Relations, and Public Relations, Building Developers, Professionals, and member of the MIA Association Board.
It's good to see you.
Nick Halston, board member of Vision Long Island and developer for Mill Creek Residential, V2, TOD, throughout Long Island.
Connie Heather, I'm a councilperson from New
Christina Tui, I'm an engineer with Arcadis. I lead the environmental engineering group there, and I'm a resident of the town of Middleton.
Rob Gito, from the Gito Group, we're developers based out of Port Jefferson.
Jim Garahan, Senior Landscape Architect with Freeman Peterson Consulting Engineers. Similar to Ray, that's my day job. I'm kind of retired from my night job, which is a little bit different. I've lived in a condominium all of my adult life, basically. So I have a little different view on cluster developments and some of the smart growth ideas, and I've seen that firsthand as a board member.
Rich Gardino, former supervisor of Town of Hempstead, currently the executive director of Long Island Regional Planning Council.
Good to see you.
Good morning, Max Sokol, planner at WSP Parsons Brinker Huff. Grew up and used to work for Nassau County, and I'm the incoming president of the American Planning Association, New York Metro chapter.
Greg Del Rio, director of transportation for the NV5, formerly RBA Group.
Jim Burke, town attorney, town of Southampton.
Thank you. And please, anytime you have a question, raise your hand. More than glad to entertain it.
Great. So thank you very much for your I just wanted to, so this is where we know what you do. We have a various group of individuals from different parts representing different things. But what we find as the Suffolk County Lines of Chambers, Long Island Business Council, even Vision Long Island, what we find is that development is a process, not a light switch. So if you take that in mind and realize that you have to plan that process. And what we find is communication being the most important part. If you were at the morning session was very, very good, very informative. You would figure that you had all those supervisors and mayors and so on, elected officials there. It was a great format. So if when you say there's nothing like a visual aid, this means cutting the red tape, right? So this is it. So that's a visual aid, but does it work? And how do we make that work? But I have to tell you something. From the standpoint of what I do also, in addition to, I work in the Ledge currently, but in working in real estate for 20, 30 years, in property management and development, working with developers, I understand that. I feel your pain. I understand it, and we want to make sure we truncate it to a point that we get the support. So what I guess one piece of takeaway advice is communication. When you put together your development team, that's the most important thing. If you have an idea that you want to move forward, get the right people in mind, communicate that, bring that just not over to the town board, but the community. That's what happened in Avalon. That's what they were referring to this morning, was what happened in Huntington. Where did the world come to an end? Well, because a lot of Avalon, and Ken can tell you, was very supportive. They were working with the town board, and the community woke up to it a little later on in the process and changed the dynamic. So the community came together with the town board, and they said, let's mold the clay together. So I think that was an important aspect of a learning process for Huntington. And since then, you know, Renaissance Downtown has come in, and they're doing such great projects there. They're doing it all over Long Island and anywhere where there's a transportation hub. But it's a process where there's a ground source, the ground plate, what was it? What's the saying that he uses?
Crowdsource the
Crowdsource placemaking. Thank you very much. Yeah, of course you do. Here we have Renaissance in the back. Andrea, thank you very much for coming with us. But the crowdsource placemaking should be part of the CEQA process. We find that that's in, I know the supervisor of town of Huntington relies on that, because if you're able to remediate a lot of the issues that you have before you start, and you have the community on board, you will get a fast track in there. And the towns, I know in the county, are looking at truncating the process to give you incentivizing. To, if you do LEED certified, or you do anything else with county programs and town programs, or even state programs, that they'll fast track it. So that was really what I wanted to share.
A few years ago, an elected, the administration changed in federal government, and they said there's going to be shovel-ready jobs. In my world, I have never seen a shovel-ready job ever. And I don't think there has been. They use that terminology because if they say is we're ready to do something, and in the end, you still have to go through the CEQA process. You still have to go through the zoning review and process. You still have to go through the local community process. And again, my question to you is, do you think that they should take that away from local communities?
Mitch could answer. Mitch could probably do that one.
On what regard?
On local communities and their zoning and CEQA process, because...
No, I mean, that's not, it's not gonna happen. Everybody who tells you it's gonna happen is joking, okay? New York State is a home rule state. It's in the Constitution. The villages and towns have local zoning powers, and CEQA is a state law. That, however, does not mean that that cannot be modified to allow for work that needs to be done on a quicker basis. But to assume that we're going to take zoning powers away from the villages and towns is not going to happen. However, having said that, the villages and towns that want to be progressive can do a lot on their own to make the development process easier. Many times, towns and villages should, on their own, like we've built up Long Island over the last 50 years, where everything is segregated. This area is residential, this area is commercial, this area is office, this area is recreational, not just on uses, and never the twain shall meet. Now we begin to realize that maybe that was not the best way to develop, and that it's much better to develop where there's an integration of uses. The only way you can get an integration of uses is if the towns and the villages change their zoning codes to allow it.
Yeah, but how do you get away from the naysayers, the people in the community that will say, you know what, not in my backyard, you're not going to build it?
Listen, that takes leadership, okay? That takes municipal elected leadership. And in those places on Long Island where it is happening today, and you can hear the list that was in this morning, and there are other places, the one thing that they have is leadership. Whether it's Paul Pontieri, or Peter Cavallaro, or Richie Schaefer, or Ed Romaine, wherever it happens, they have leadership. That is the most important thing. It doesn't happen every place, nor should it happen every place. There are lots of beautiful single-family development places on Long Island that will always continue to be single-family development places, okay? Many of us may live in one, but that doesn't mean that on the main roads or other places or in the downtowns You cannot have mixed-use development together so that the same integration of uses occurs in a much smaller area. We've all seen perfect examples of where it works. You know, Paul Pontieri and I would kid each other all the time. I never used Patchogue as an example because it was the only example. The great thing about Long Island at the moment is that Patchogue is not the only example of where it works. There are lots of places where it has worked, where it is being developed to work, but what those places have is leadership to understand that it is complementary for a mixed-use development in a downtown area and a single-family development a mile away. They complement each other. Why do they complement each other? Because sooner or later, I'm going to want to sell my house. Where I live in Stony Brook. I'm going to want to sell my house. Almost every home transaction that occurs on Long Island occurs between somebody who already lives on Long Island and somebody else who lives on Long Island. We don't get too many people coming in from Austin, Texas. Okay? But what that means is, if that person does not already live on Long Island, whether it's in an apartment or a condominium or whatever, and now wants to buy the single-family home, mine, or yours, or wherever it is, they have to be here first. And so what we do is we close the circle. The diversity of housing options provides opportunities for everybody at every income level, at every professional level, so that sooner or later they can take advantage of all the options that are available. But that takes zoning, and that takes the ability of local municipalities to decide, I'm now going to allow for integration, and I'm going to rezone certain properties to allow it, even on their own motion. It's much better for a municipality to do it on their own motion than to wait for a developer to come in and ask. Because the developer really doesn't want to ask. They'd much prefer the municipality to do it itself. Let the municipality rezone the property for mixed use, then put out an RFP, then they will get responses.
So I think that I've been in the commercial real estate industry for 28 years now. In the past 10 years, I've seen the most monumental change on this particular topic. So this topic really isn't about what can we do to get through the red tape. This should be more about what we've done in certain instances, and some of them that Mitch has spoken about, to cut the red tape, and how do we now propagate that into the rest of Long Island. Early on, the successes like Patchogue, Patchogue was a pretty bad place, and when something's that bad, there's more political will, there's more private will, resident will to get change. So that's the low-hanging fruit, and those are the things that have kind of changed. I'm not saying that Paul didn't do a great job. A village is easier to run than a township. You've got a much smaller geographical area, less diversification within that village generally, which is why it became a village. But here's an example. Right now, if we tell you that the IDA gave $114 million out to a company, right? How many people feel somewhat negative about that, right? We gave some of our tax money to them, $114 million. If we assign with that propagated a $9.8 billion private investment, do you feel better about that $114 million tax break we gave them? So if you could look up New York State, Nassau and Suffolk County, 2013 is the last audited financial statements they have for the IDA. $114 million is what Nassau and Suffolk did. $9.8 billion was the private investment associated with it. So what's been happening in the areas where we've had success is local government is now putting on a marketing hat. Because before they sat back, and Avalon was a great example. I was on the Economic Development Corp with Ken Christensen over in Huntington, and it was an absolute bloodbath. It's probably the worst thing that I've seen in 28 years. But you go there now and you talk to the people that are now, it's a beautiful addition to that marketplace. But what happened was, what would have made that easier if the town became the voice for the project and not the big bad developer that's trying to make money. Because he's making more money, we don't like him, he's taking advantage of the community. There's different things that we've been doing. And even now, when I handle a project, the first thing that I do, I meet with the guy selling whatever land it is. The second thing I do, I go meet with the municipality. Don't market it, don't put any information together, I go meet with the municipality, we'll check the zoning, we check what's going on on other projects in the area that I might not be aware of, that they're aware of. And you have sort of like a synergistic effort to deal with residents. Now, I felt that anytime I've had a discussion, a one-on-one discussion with any of most of the residents, I don't want to say all the residents, there's been an intelligent exchange and you're able to move forward. But if you are isolated and there's misinformation, there's a Facebook page of misinformation, you know, about the sewer's going to blow up if we do this. Now everybody's worried about the sewer blowing up. If this is going to happen, the school district is going to have double the kids. You know, there needs to be a more concerted effort. And hopefully today here we can share what we've done over the past 10 years to help that. And, you know, I think another motivating factor is the 2% tax cut. The townships are now forced to say, hey, look, maybe we need to broaden that tax base. And I tell residents, if you're paying $20,000 a year and you're willing to pay $40,000, we don't need to develop anything else. But Long Island has always grown from the 50s, 60s, 70s. There's always been more people here that year than there was the year before. So there was always an increasing group of people paying the legacy costs and the tax costs. Now we don't have that anymore. We have stagnant growth, maybe a little bit negative, and the demographic that's coming in from Brooklyn, Queens that are getting displaced over there are not the people that are able to pay that $20,000, $30,000 in taxes. So I think that's part of...
You touched on a good point, and it was about the IDAs. I used to sit on an IDA board years ago and listen to the applicants. And recently, there was an issue that ended up in Newsday that, in my perception, became more political than actual factual. So whether it be right or wrong, whatever happened, that's not what I'm trying to get to. What I'm getting now, let's fast forward to the future. There's a problem now there's going to be a problem with all IDAs making a decision and having then the potential of the public coming out and saying, that's not a good idea, why are you giving them a tax break? So that now is going to cause, in my opinion, somewhat of a failure in the system, because IDAs may not approve something which they really need that economic development. And again, it always has to be a balance, but it became a politically, in my opinion, motivated issue, because I don't really think all the facts are really out there yet. That, I think, is hurting the communities of the towns and the villages. Yes, Keith?
So we touched on it a little while ago, but integrated into these development processes is, of course, the CEQA regulations. And we've experienced CEQA delaying a project, sometimes causing a project to just come to a complete halt. The state of New York, about 4 years ago, promulgated proposed regulations. They didn't do it in particularity, but they said that we were going to amend the CEQA regulations to basically better define what requires a DEIS and what doesn't, and to try and cut the time frames. And we're involved with several projects right now, and in spite of the best that you do in terms of interacting with the towns and the villages, if you don't address and get through the CEQA process, you're not going to have a project. So what the state is proposing, and again, we haven't seen it in any particularities, is to redefine, or to better define what requires a DEIS, and interestingly, to require scoping. And I think everybody knows what scoping is. It's defining the issues. Because once you define the issues that have to be reviewed in a draft environmental impact statement, it's much more difficult for somebody later on, and again, we've all seen this, to come in and say that the DEIS was inadequate because it didn't analyze X, Y, and Z. Well, if there's an amendment to the secret regulations that requires scoping, it's optional. And it's probably a good idea to do, because if you have public scoping, then it's more difficult for opponents down the road, after you've gotten your approvals, to claim that you missed something. So you didn't take that, quote, hard look. So one of the items that DEC is looking at, it's been 4 years. I mean, nothing, this should have been something that was reviewed quickly, regulations promulgated quickly, because just like the secret process goes very slow, this process is going very slow. One of the proposals that they were considering was putting a time frame on the time between a draft environmental impact statement and a final environmental impact statement. The guys up here on the podium understand that there could be years in between. Opponents of projects know how to effectively oppose a project, whether it's unfounded or not. And what we need to do is to amend the secret regulations so that there's still going to be plenty of time for public input, public dialogues. That's what SEQRA is all about, and that's what's mandated by SEQRA. But when you get through the process and you have a scope that's already been defined of what's going to be studied, somebody shouldn't be able to come in and say, oh wait, you didn't study this. And they start in Article 78, and those Article 78s take a significant amount of time to come to resolution. And then what happens if there is an Article 78, and I'm sure everybody has seen this, lenders are afraid to skeptical about lending money because, well, what if the court overturns the approval? It's been a very, it creates a lot of uncertainty. So what we really need to do also is, including everything that my colleagues have suggested, we need to take a real hard look at the secret regulations, not to stifle public comment. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. But to try and expedite the system, expedite the process in a way where everybody is able to comment on it, but at the time that once all the comments are in, right, then that's it. Then let's move forward. And I think we have to put some specific time frames on it. There are not many time frames within the secret process right now.
So are you suggesting that they change and put language in the secret regulations that public comment needs to be X, Y, Z, or what? Go ahead.
What's one of the proposals, and it really came from the state, is to require that an FEIS, a final environmental impact statement, right, which is after the draft environmental impact statement and comments and public hearing, that be adopted within, I believe it was 180 days of the DEIS being adopted. That forces the municipality to really move forward expeditiously to have the applicant respond to comments. They've already held a public hearing, but to prepare secret finding statements and to make a determination of whether it's going to be approved or denied. It's not shortcutting the process, believe me, because right now the process is so elongated that it results in project failure. That's the reality.
Okay. I think I've heard from several people that, basically misinformation fills a vacuum. And now with what Keith's comment, very often, I've worked with builder developers for years, very often the communications to the community really doesn't start, it sounds like early enough. Is that
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So at what point do you feel that they should get their messages out to the targets, basically, which is the community members?
If I may, we touched on that. The crowdsourced placemaking that was done earlier on, Catherine, great. It's a great point. I think you need to start that before you put an application. I found too many other projects. They walk into the towns or the villages, they have an application, they file it, then it becomes a public document, the community finds out, and they say, wait a second, why are we behind, the cart, you're putting the cart before the horse. Why aren't you giving us an opportunity? I think that's part of what the charrettes were, a part of the visioning process, and also part of the crowdsourced placemaking. So I think you start early on.
Yeah, except that I find builder developers, resistant to process. Is that
Well, I think,
anybody else's experience?
Well, because they always, if there was a public hearing, they wanted the least amount of people to hear about it, they wanted to sneak in and sneak out, and, right. So that's changed, and that's part of why there's been successes now. But the efforts, the majority, the bigger efforts, like right now in Huntington, I'm on the Huntington Planning Board as well. Right now in Huntington, we're revisioning Melville. Melville is 18 million square feet of office industrial buildings. That's very successful. So to try to get a focus on something that's working and saying, hey, it might not work in 10 years and in 20 years. So we did it. There's no application from a developer. So we did it from the municipality side, and we did a study. We included the public, and you always are going to have those naysayers. You could put up a free cancer research hospital for children. There'll be people coming out against it. But if you communicate, so we've had over 2 years, we've had 6 charrettes, not talking about any particular building or anything, but talking about an overlay district within that community. And in the beginning, everybody was listening, talking, and then you had those handful of people that were very much against it. You know what got them to quiet down? The rest of the residents. Because they were like, listen, what you're saying is wrong, that's not it. So that's part of it. Because if it's a municipality driven, I mean, right now, look, the people aren't looking that much more trusting at the municipality as they are at the developer. But I think if you have that communication, like I said, people that I've spoken to on a one-to-one, they're intelligent people, and if you give them the same set of information that you have, and you hear the same bit of information that they have, you could come up to a similar result. So the secret issue is a symptom. You could put in some locksteps on how to do it, and I know exactly what he's saying. If you do an Article 78, the person initiating it might have to pay for it if it doesn't go through. But that's a symptom. I think if you get buy-in early on before you're trying to get something specific approved, then you're going to get the community, because now they're understanding what the issues are.
Yeah, just, Catherine, you raised a very good point, and Connie knows this, but in the town of Brookhaven, and it's not just the town of Brookhaven, when you're proposing a project, you'll be asked, have you met with the civics? Have you spoken, right Connie? Have you spoken with the civics? So we know that in the town of Brookhaven, we have to meet with the civics even before we file an application. And I think that's the appropriate way to go.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second. Yes, you're right, and that's always one of the things when I help developers. You go into Brookhaven, you must meet with the civics first.
No, that's not true.
Well,
That's illegal.
and
Connie knows that. Connie knows that.
But you do it anyway.
You do it anyway. but
Yeah.
You do it. The court's
Is that-
ruled that you cannot be required to meet with any outside group.
Understood.
No, but it's a practical suggestion.
But I don't want to use the word must, because that makes it sound as if it is legal, it is illegal to do.
If you want to try and move your project along.
you might want to consider it. There's a
Hey, we
distinction with a
spent
difference.
a lot of time winning that case. Context.
I found it both sides, because sometimes even the municipality doesn't want to have this go. They don't want to have the public hearing. They'd rather, because there's a possibility that they'd have to, not that they don't want to, but they're going to have to educate the community as to this thing will really work. This development will be good for your community, and it's going to take some time for it to actually work out in the community. So it's a double-edged sword.
And that's why, remember, most of these projects are change of zones, okay? Change of zones are legislative actions. The municipality never has to vote or do anything, even if you hand them an application. They could give you the application back, okay? So that's why it is so important for the municipality itself to do the rezoning if it wants to make the project happen, if it wants to do an overlay district like Melville, like we're talking about in Hicksville, like we're talking about in Riverhead on Route 58 that Sean Walter discussed this morning. All of those are municipal proposals. There's no developer proposal. Lots of developers are sitting back waiting to see what happens, but it's much easier for the municipality to do it on its own without the fear of this guy is gonna build 500 units. Now, 500 units may be right, 500 units may be wrong, but once you put an application, Keith and I know what happens. If you do it without an application in there, you have a much better conversation, a much better discussion with the community, because the municipality is handling the discussion. And then you can decide, okay, we're gonna include an overlay district, we're gonna do a change of zone and whatever. Then after that happens, a developer or developers would be able to come in and say, okay, I now know the municipality wants this to happen. Why? Because they've already changed the zoning to accommodate the project to happen. That makes the entire process much easier than relying on the developer to come in and saying, you know what, this is, this was zoned A1, now it should be zoned multifamily. I can assure you, that is the end all of the discussion. Notwithstanding the fact that the municipality may want it, it's much easier to do it the other way.
But that's the exception rather than the rule.
I understand that, but it's still the better way to do it.
So listen, the towns, villages, municipality, they have what you call situational authority, right? You go to the motor vehicle, whoever's behind the counter's got situational authority over you. What you need, instead of fighting them, instead of fighting the town, I've had very close friends, and both close friends of Mitchell and I, that are trying to get something approved, and they're threatening to sue the town, threatening to do this, and he and I are like, listen, let us help you. We'll get this thing through. No, the town should not be allowed to do this. It's unconstitutional. I'm going to do this, going to do that. They fight for 5, 7 years, or whatever it is, get nothing accomplished, and just are not pissed off. Now the town, from my experience, and listen, I'm a private sector guy that has gotten into the public sector to see why things weren't happening. So I was on the EDC, on the planning board, involved in other committees and groups, and there's good people on the government side. They have certain things, certain checklists that they need to do, but I gotta tell you, if they buy into what you're trying to do, they're ushering you through the process. If you're not, then they're blocking you through the process. And they're blocking you maybe because they don't want to make a mistake. When moratoriums come up, it sounds like a big horrible thing, but sometimes the boards are just not prepared and don't have enough information to make a decision on that particular, topic. So all of this is pre-education on that, and I think that's what we're all saying.
Yeah, if I may, it's much to that point David makes. You look at the elected officials, you look at certain things, it comes down to certain words like courage, leadership, perception, reality, communication. I'll just handle a couple of those. Courage, the courage to take a 2% tax cap on Paul Pontieri. First point that he made is, he sat with us, I said, Paul, how'd you do it? He said, I just did it. I said, did you worry about it not happening, you're not getting reelected? He said, well, I'm going to tell you what I do. It's design, it's density over design. You give me a good design, I'll give you the density. So he who had the courage took on Senator Schumer. Also, you probably read about that in the New York Times, but he had the ability to do that. So Town of Huntington did the same thing, and I applaud Frank, I applaud the town board on a 5-0 vote of doing that. Why? What do we benefit from that courage of doing that? Now, I'm sure you want to make sure that you also, when you're planning a project, I like to drive 10 cars ahead. Look at the election cycles. There's a state and a federal, there's a town and a municipality. You don't think that becomes part of it? It certainly does. And whether you get caught into that vortex, and much to what Keith and Mitch were saying, in terms of the CEQA regulations, maybe they kick the can down the road, and the next thing you know, you're in someone's political cycle, and there you go. Who wants to have a vote, a typical vote, but you have to have the courage. So you have a 2% tax cap that comes in. Well, what happens? Well, the town of Huntington, something that should happen, maybe there should be a parking district that you're able to do that. And now have everyone says that Huntington has parking issues. Mark Cufferson says that's a great thing. It really is from the perspective. It's better than being the Maytag repairman and not having anybody call. You want people to show up. So you have that. You have the ability to also look at the Huntington Station bid. We looked at the Huntington Station bid, and that's where they're spending a lot of time and money, right? Time, talent, and treasure. Well, that's where it is. Well, guess what? If you expand the Huntington Station bid, right now Huntington Station gets $90,000. You expand it up to the end, the 4 corners of the Huntington Station, we calculated about $320,000. coming from small businesses, of which we did poll, and said, you know something, we're willing to do it because $37 on my frontage, $65 on the other frontage. Why should a mall be exempt? And that's really what it was. Well, we could cut the mall out. I said, well, they're, you know, for downtown businesses, small businesses, they're taking away a lot of business. It's like the online business. So the courage was important. The leadership also is something that you should look at. Your elected officials, not just their courage and leadership, but who they appoint to boards. I've gone, when I first came to this town 25 years ago, first thing I did, I got off the Long Island Railroad, I stopped, got a bite to eat, and I went for the dinner and a show. I went to a planning board and zoning board. I wanted to see exactly what the show was like. It was a show. And let me tell you something, chairs were flying, things like that. You have great, no, I'm just saying, that was then, this is now. You have real good leaders there, and those leaders appoint great leaders. Dave Panetta being one of them, not because he's up here, because I've gone to the planning boards. I've listened to them. I've seen people like Mitch Bailey. Mitch Bailey comes to the county. I work in the county. I refer people say, why are you working in the county? I said, well, I'm sort of like an undercover businessman. I said, I still have the understanding of my mentality as a businessman when I walk through the door. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Someone said to me, don't drink the Kool-Aid today. I said, okay. But my point is that you have great leaders. Something that you start seeing from the inside or the other side of the horseshoe is Mitch Bailey approached one of the committees, and they're doing density. They're doing density for affordable housing, a greatest incentive. You get better sewage and so on. They're going to reduce the fees if you do more affordable housing. You know something, what a great project. So you look at these certain areas of perception and reality and communication. I think that's a big part of it, but don't shortchange taking out a calendar, maybe it's a Gregorian calendar, working 5 years ahead. I'm telling you, you will get caught into this vortex where your project is alive, to where it's dead, to where it comes back. Avalon Bay, much to the determination of the town board and the residents, they took on that challenge, and guess what? It works. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I think the grassroots communication and education process is so very important, but it needs to be the big picture. I think that's when it's successful, and that big picture is master planning. We're an old suburb. It's so much less about that building or that facility that's being built, and it's more like, what's my new town, or what's my new county? And when you start to explain that whole picture, people can get on board to some of the things that might be difficult, like affordable housing, young professionals, the people you want to have buy your house, poverty level for a family of four, anything under 90,000 that are working people. You start to talk about IDA. Hey, wait, here's the benefit. And that's the story that needs to be told.
You know, the proof in the pudding is in the eating, and I just want to say, from the planning board from 30 years ago to now, we don't throw chairs because now we're video. but look at Oyster Bay right now. So Oyster Bay has been difficult to get things approved, and now we've got Syosset Park moving forward. There's the overlay district for the downtown that the town is backing and doing exactly what we're saying here. So what the difference is they're saying, hey, look at Mineola, look at Patchogue, look at all these other areas that are benefiting. Look at Huntington. Look at Riverhead. Riverhead did the same thing. The town board put together. They got rid of, so what Mitch was talking about before, where you've got residential, you've got retail, office, industrial. That's called Euclidean zoning. It's set. This is where it is. No matter what happens, this is where the zoning is, and you can't deviate. What Riverhead did was they took 680 acres and they said, we're getting rid of the Euclidean zoning and we're doing exactly what he's saying is performance-based zoning. The aggregate, if we add up the residential and all these different components, is this. And we're going to run SECRA on that before they even started marketing the property. So SECRA came out, and now they're giving a 90-day approval process. So if someone comes in and it doesn't, the first project doesn't blow up the 680 acres worth of aggregate space that they studied, you get a 90-day approval. So that's a genius thing. Oyster Bay right now is looking at other successes, and now they're saying, hey, let's do that tower downtown. The state's putting 120, with the MTA, right, it's putting $121 million into the Hicksville train station. You go there, they're working on it. It's not like it's going to happen next year. It should be finished in the beginning of next year. So there's things that are happening, and I feel good. To me, this isn't a negative topic. It's a very positive topic.
One of the things you pointed to is Riverhead, and then doing work out there. One thing I commend them for is the compliment, I should say, is the actual having a public meeting. You call up with a developer and say, I want to come in there and I want to sit down and show you my project. They actually videotape it. It's during the daytime. It's open to the public. You actually talk to the supervisor, the other council members, whoever's there at the meeting, planning director, and go through the entire process. And then they'll actually give you some type of finding and saying, okay, now go through the process, go to the building department, file your application. It's all before you even move forward. I actually think that that helps a lot because the developer who's going to spend a lot of money on a project will actually gear whether they really want to move forward with that project.
So I just want to add one other thing. So in these projects now, the developers are getting more organized with one another. So developers were always very much separate silos. I didn't know what he was building, what he was doing, what his properties are doing. Now they're getting much more social. So now you've got, if you've got a bunch of residents coming out against something, you got a bunch of commercial building owners coming out as well. So the town board is not only hearing of all the residents that are against it, they're talking to all the people that are for it. So that's also happening.
Any other questions? Yes.
The topic here is cutting red tape, and I think the whole atmosphere has changed in the last 10 years about the way developers do business to some extent, the way municipalities are handling things. But I have one problem in cutting red tape, and that's, in our case, the Suffolk County Department of Health. You talk about red tape, I think that is the biggest deterrent to getting a project done, is meeting those health department regulations. And the regulations, I have no problem with the regulations. They're there to protect our very important commodity of our water, aquifers, and those regulations should be there. But the process for a developer to go through with the project and get approved, and my comment has always been, whatever it takes to have the right amount of people, the right amount of expertise, charge the developer, charge the homeowner, but get the thing done. And the delay in that process is more detrimental, I think, the project's being done, at least in Suffolk County, than any NIMBYism in the city.
I think everybody would indicate that the county health department, and they would indicate themselves that they are not perfect in their budget process. Having said that, we have made significant changes with them over the last couple of years. The process is significantly better than it was. I'm not going to tell you it's perfect, and they're not going to tell you it's perfect. But I can get a permit now in 3 weeks. Okay? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I'm going to use him. Okay?
What you saw?
Yes. And they've had, unfortunately, the gentleman who did a lot of that, who we all know, who was a gem. Walter Hilbert was ill and just died. And Walter was a gem in, come on in, let's talk, we'll all sit down, we'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
And that has put a lot of discomfort on everybody else there, because Walter took all of that himself. We're hopeful that the county executive will replace, now that Walter has passed away, replace Walter with someone of that level who can do all of that, because Walter would sit with you, he'd look at the project, and he'd want you to come in beforehand, right? So he'd look at the project, he said, that looks good, 1, 2, 3, can you make those 3 changes, we're done. And you knew, if you made those 3 changes, you were done. Walter would give you a permit as quickly as he could do it in the process. So, as I said, I think they are much better than they were. They're not perfect. We're going through now changes to Article 6 on septic systems and single-family homes and commercial developments, and that's going to have a major impact on the county because of nitrogen flow, something that has to happen. But they are getting better. It's with everything else. Sometimes it depends on how you approach them. And they love for you to sit down with them first, especially on larger projects, so they can see, you know, where it is, where's the nearest sewer line, where's the latest sewer treatment plant to be able to connect to, whatever it is that they have in that focus. As I said, that's not to say they are not an impediment sometimes, and they'll tell you that. But I think it's gotten much better.
There's also, Mitch is 100% correct, but what I've noticed in the last couple of years is that there's been a significant turnover within the health department. Certain people, you know, who are constants, are still there, of course, unfortunately, Bill Walter's tragic death, but also it's a question of allocation of resources. If the health department is what's holding up, ultimately you're getting a building permit, because it won't hold up your zoning per se, right? Typically, but it's going to hold you up getting a building permit. Then maybe the county needs to, and I know there's limited resources, but we got to put them where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck.
But do they understand the concept that they can charge? Because it's the time that costs the
They're not allowed
developer.
to at the moment. County law has to be changed to allow that to happen. It is one of the things we have talked to them about. You know, I'm not a great believer in somebody paying to get to the top of the line. My feeling is we should change the process so everybody gets to the top of the line without having to pay. That's always been my philosophy. I understand that's always not the best solution in certain places, so you do that in some regard. So that is one of the things they're looking at. But I think all of that's going to change with the Article 6 changes as they come about, because they realize there are going to be lots of things in there that are going to make the process different than it is today.
You know, there's other workarounds that are much more prevalent than they were before, is flow credits. So Huntington has a program where if you need additional flow on the property, there's a secondary market that has flow credits you can buy from other properties that now get sterilized. In Suffolk County, there's 14 different categories of flow credits, whether you're in the Pine Barrens, Carmen River, you know, whatever, which kind of dictates pricing and dictates where they could go. But that's not fixing the structural problem here, but it is sort of helping a little bit in getting projects moving ahead and getting higher density on certain projects.
But yeah, if I may,
We have a time element, it's 5 after 11.
you know, we talk about waking up, showing up, and speaking up. Well, that's what you've done today, and I commend you for that. But one of the things, getting back to what Ken said or what Joanne said about communication with the health department, working for the county legislature, you have to show up, not to the general meetings. If you really want to see difference, show up to the committee meetings. Doc Spencer is the chair of the health department committees. He hears it all the time. I speak to him all the time about it as well. So you have to show up and you have to speak up. He's one of the individuals that will certainly help you on that initiative.
Everyone, I'd like to thank you very much for attending. Great panel.